Hello, my name is Sherry Miller, and I am the director of Renat Academy, which is a Cutter Foundation school for children with autism. Today I'm going to be presenting to you a program called Autism Champions, which was developed by the National Autistic Society in UK. They have given us permission to share this information with you because they want us to increase the awareness of autism across Qatar and also the region. Also presenting with me today is Dr. Christina Roberts, who works as Renat Academy's school psychologist. Ms. Sana Abdul Majid will also be presenting, and she is one of Renat Academy's occupational therapists. This video should last approximately an hour, so you want to make sure that you're comfortable and have a paper and pencil with you so that you can jot down some ideas as we're talking. Let's get started. We are going to be talking today about autism and how people with autism experience that. This will help give you a better insight into how you might respond to somebody by understanding what it's like for them and what they're experiencing. Much of that can be summed up in these three words, which is too much information. This is a theme that has been put together by National Autistic Society, which well describes what a lot of people with autism experience, and that is that they're receiving too much information through all of the different sensory inputs. I'm going to start out by talking to you about some of the difficulties that autistic people face on a daily basis. People with autism are not all the same. It's considered a spectrum because some people with autism have some characteristics and they might have them very severely, whereas other people with autism might not even be experiencing those characteristics. An example would be communication. Some people with autism find it very easy to socialize and communicate with others, while others find this very challenging. So all that autism diagnosis tells you is whether they have autism or not, but it can't fully describe each person. And it takes getting to know each person as individuals in order to really understand what's happening. I'm going to come back later to some characteristics on autism. But first, we're going to start with looking at some different scenarios to help you better understand what people with autism might be experiencing. So let's say you're at the mall and you see a child who's shouting at a woman that you think is probably his mom. The child starts to hit his mom. So this child is autistic. Why might he be behaving like this? Take just a few minutes, pause the video, and jot down some ideas of why might this child be acting like this. All right, hopefully you've written some ideas down. Let's just go over a few ideas. Because again, every person with autism is different, so they might be exhibiting these behaviors for a variety of reasons. But here's some ideas. The child might be scared because they might be overwhelmed by the sounds and the smells and the bright lights in the mall. And this is very common. Again, it is that idea that there's too much information. Their senses are overloaded, and so they are feeling scared. They also might be feeling confused. It's common in autism that if you're in unfamiliar surroundings or with unfamiliar people, or even if something has changed in your schedule, you might be confused by that. People with autism also might be feeling anxiety. They could be feeling nervous about going into a shop that they've never been to before, or going into an area with people they haven't seen before. And so any change, whether big or small, can take them a while to get used to. The child might also be feeling frustrated. They might know exactly what the problem is, but not able to communicate it to their mom. And so they're frustrated with themselves, they're frustrated with others. If only they could communicate, things would be so much better. Now let's take a minute to think about how the mom might be feeling. The mom might be feeling embarrassed because she knows that people are watching and they're probably thinking that she's not a good mom. This is very common for parents of people with autism to be thought of as not having good parenting skills, and it's quite embarrassing. She also might be feeling upset because anytime that one of our children is distressed, we also feel distressed. So she might be just feeling upset because she's empathizing with how he feels. She might be feeling scared because maybe in the past, when something like this has happened, it has just escalated into a worse and worse scenario, and the child may have even tried to hurt himself. So she may be feeling scared. So now that we've talked a little bit about how the child might feel and how the parent might feel, think about how with this information you might respond to either the mom or the child in a different way than before when you didn't understand this. Here's another scenario. Say you're at the metro stop and the metro doesn't arrive on time. One woman there that's waiting with you, she starts to pace back and forth and is very agitated. She's walking very quickly back and forth, and she's even shouting a bit. This woman is autistic. Take a minute again, pause the video, and write down why you think she might be behaving like this. All right. Again, like we talked about in the other scenario, this woman might be feeling anxious. She might be very confused by the unexpected change to her day, and that's causing anxiety. She might be trying to figure out, well, you know, if this bus is late or if this train is late, then she might be missing an appointment coming up. There could be all sorts of things that she's scared about happening. She might be feeling confused because she was sure that the timetable said this is when the train was going to come, and yet it's not here. So isn't that what a timetable is for? Are any of the timetables right? So she could be very confused about that. She might be feeling frightened. She might be remembering that, you know what, when something like this has happened before, and she's felt like this before, that people started trying to come and control her and tell her what to do, and it just became a very bad situation, and she'd really like to avoid that happening again. The last thing that might be happening is that she might be stimming. Whenever somebody paces back and forth or flaps their hands, that's what we call self-stimulation. They're trying to calm themselves. That's the stimulation that they're seeking, is calming. And so in this case, she might be walking back and forth and pacing just to try to calm herself. But sometimes you might see somebody who is stimming, maybe they're flapping their hands. It might not be that they're trying to calm themselves. For them, it might be that they're just trying to express their happiness or they're excited. So stimming can come in a lot of different forms. Now I'm going to start talking about some common myths and facts that come about when we think about autism. The first one is autism affects more than 1 in 100 people. This is a fact, and it's a fact everywhere around the world. There was just a prevalence study that was done in Qatar a few years ago, and they found that it's about 1 in every 87 people have autism. And when they extrapolated that out, that means there's about 5,000 children in Qatar who have autism. And if you include adults, well, we could at least double that. And so there's likely 10,000 people in Qatar who have autism. In larger countries like UK, it's thought that there might even be 700,000 people there who have autism. And their ratios are very similar to what we found in Qatar. Next, let's think about this one. People tend to grow out of autism into adulthood. This is a myth. People do not grow out of autism. Once you have autism, you will always have it. You don't catch it. It's not a disease. It's something that you're born with. And so this is a lifelong condition, and so this is a myth. The next one is autism affects both boys and girls. This is a fact. Although there's actually more boys that are diagnosed than girls with autism. This is probably because we don't understand the characteristics that are portrayed in girls as much as we do in boys. They're a little bit more hidden, but as we come to understand autism in girls more and more, we're finding that there are more girls that have autism than we thought in the past. Some autistic people don't speak. This is a fact that people with autism, some of them speak and some of them don't. When we have people with autism who don't speak, then we try to find another means for them to communicate. And this might be by sign language. We have programs like the PECS program, which is using pictures. There are augmentative communication systems, which have electronic speech. So there's all sorts of different mechanisms that have been developed to help people with autism communicate. And but it is true that some people with autism don't speak. Autism is a mental health problem. This is a myth. People with autism do not have any more mental health problems than any other people in the world. Yes, some may struggle, but so do other groups of people in the world struggle with mental health. Autism is actually a developmental disability, and it affects the brain and how it works. And so it is not a mental health problem. All autistic people are geniuses. This is also a myth. Yes, it's true that there are some people with autism who are very good at memorization. They may be very smart in certain areas. They may have special talents that we don't see very often, but not all autistic people are geniuses. And so it's very important to understand that when you're interacting with somebody with autism, they could be a very typical thinker, or about half of the people with autism actually have some kind of developmental disability that includes their cognition. Their IQs might actually be affected by their autism. The last one is everyone is a bit autistic. This is a myth. You either are autistic or you are not. Again, if you have some of the characteristics that people with autism have, well, that's just something that you have in common, but it doesn't make you a bit autistic. It just means that you've also found that pacing back and forth or some other such activity like that or behavior, it may calm you as well, but it doesn't mean that you have a little bit of autism.
Six, 7, 8, 9. Take my hand. naughty. I'm autistic. And I just get too much information.
Hi, my name is Dr. Christina Lee Roberts. I am a school psychologist at Renner Academy. I hope you have enjoyed our presentation so far. The short video that you just watched was made as part of the National Autistic Society Too Much Information campaign in 2015. It features 11-year-old Alex Marshall walking through a shopping center. This video gives us an insight into some of the challenges that Alex and many other children and adults with autism experience. From the video, you can see how sensory overload caused Alex to have a meltdown. In this case, as Alex walked through the shopping center, the noise, smell, and lights became too overwhelmed for him. It is like all his senses are firing at once, without any filter. When Alex's senses are overstimulated, that becomes too much for him, resulting in a meltdown. Besides the challenge with sensory overload, people with autism are skilled in things that others aren't. And sometimes, things that everyone finds easy are the most challenging for them. For example, people with autism find learning through visual or picture less challenging than learning by listening to another person's talking. It is important to note that everyone on the autism spectrum is different. Some people find it difficult to say what they need and how they feel, while others find it hard to understand people and how they are expected to behave. It works both ways though. People with autism can feel misunderstood. Despite trying their hardest every day, it can feel like they always get it wrong. For example, it may seem that people with autism are not keen to join in a conversation, but in fact, small talks can be very challenging for them. On another note, people with autism's brain is wired differently. They tend to be more literate than others. Saying that might seem ordinary to you may be confusing to them. For example, if you say it's raining cats and dogs outside, people with autism might think that cats and dogs are falling from the sky. As you recall from Alex's video, people with autism see, hear, and feel the world in a different way to other people due to the sensory processing issues. This could be a hyper or hyposensitivity to lights, sounds, smells, touch, or taste, amongst other things. If a person with autism has hypo or undersensitivity to sound, he might like to listen to very loud music to stimulate hearing. On the opposite side, if a person with autism has hyper or oversensitivity to light, she might like to wear sunglasses to shade her eyes from fluorescent lightings. Also, people with autism find it hard to understand others and how they're expected to behave, such as unspoken social etiquette. In this instance, they may not understand why interrupting another person speaking is rude when they have something very important to say. Another challenge is people with autism find it hard to make themselves understood, as they might need more time to process information before giving a response. Some people tend to repeat the same question if they don't get an immediate response. This can confuse people with autism, as they might be trying to compose a response to your first question when a second question is asked. Therefore, it is important that when you speak to a person with autism, do give him enough time to process the information to answer your questions before asking him again. I hope my presentation has provided you some insights as to how it feels to be a person with autism. Remember, everyone's is different. Everyone will be affected by and react to these different factors in different ways. But to be diagnosed with autism, you will be affected by all of them in one way or another. Therefore, being overwhelmed by too much information is common to everyone on the autism spectrum. In the next slide, I would like to share with you the word autism and what each letter means. A stands for anxiety. It means that when there is too much information, ordinary situation can be difficult for people with autism, thus contributing to their anxiety. In the next few minutes, I would like you to imagine the first time you attended a job interview. How did you feel or react? What kind of behavior did you show before or during the interview? Were you nervous during the interview? Did you pace up and down before when you were waiting for your turn to be interviewed? If your answers are yes, it is just to show you that we all experience similar responses to stressful situations. For people with autism, this is known as stimming or self-stimulatory. It means the repetitions of physical movements, sounds, words, or objects. In this slide, I would like to share a quote from a person with autism called Chris Banalo that helps us to understand what it is like to stim. Chris says, you tell me. Most non-autistic people impulsively tap their feet, drum their finger, or let out exaggerated sighs. They all are natural forms of self-expression. The theory behind autistic stimming is the same. We are just the one gets called out for expressing ourselves more visibly than you. It might be a surprise to you that all of us experience similar responses to a stressful situation. Okay, let's try this. Imagine you are attending an event where the speakers are too loud. You have to sit where the sun is shining in your eyes, and it was extremely hot that day. How would you react? Would you try to leave the place? Or would you cover your ears or eyes? And what would you do if you were prevented from leaving the place? Would you become angry and anxious? As Lucy Chapman's quotes here says, sometimes the sensory input is too much, and I feel like I might explode. Steaming releases the tension and makes me feel a lot calmer. Steaming is a behavior that can be helpful for people with autism to cope with stressful situations. Remember, we all respond to stressful situations in similar way. Okay, now we are going to look at the letter U. It means unexpected changes. Disruptions to a routine or plan can be extremely difficult for people with autism to manage. One example is a change in the timetable for the metro service. A person with autism may have learned that train route or take the train every day, but it suddenly changed. He could feel so anxious and out of control or confused that he had a meltdown. His autism and level of anxiety may also mean he is unable to ask other passengers or the staff at the train station for help. In this slide, I would like you to think about your morning routine. Think about what would you do when you wake up. What do you like for your breakfast? Do you have any preferences about toiletries? Do you need to do things in a particular order? People with autism may find everyday situations overwhelming, so unexpected changes can be more difficult to deal with. We all experience similar responses and reaction to stressful situations. We all need a routine to help us, especially with difficult tasks. The third letter T simply means time. Many people with autism need extra processing time before giving a response. So it is important to give them enough time to process information to answer your question. Here are two quotes that I would like to share with you about time. The first quote is from Professor Temple Grading, and she says, "My mind sort of works like a search engine. You ask me something, and I start seeing pictures." The second quote says, "An autistic person has a 30-second processing time." His support worker would say, "Do you want a cheese sandwich or a tuna sandwich for lunch?" And would then wait in silence for 30 seconds until the person answered. People with autism often need extra time to process verbal or written information. It is really important to give a person with autism time and silence to respond to a question or instruction. As with Professor Temple Grading's quote, it may be that the person with autism thinks in picture. That will mean it takes them longer to process verbal information, as they process it visually in their heads. We often talk about the 6-second rule. This means that if you say something, you should give the person 6 seconds of silence to process an answer. 6 seconds is an average guess, but some people may need longer. It is important not to interrupt the processing time. We have a habit of thinking people haven't understood if they don't answer right away. So we ask the question again or rephrase it. This will make it even tougher for the person with autism to answer because you are adding new information after the original question. Now I'm going to hand over the remaining of the presentation to one of our occupational therapists, Miss Sana Abdulmajid.
Hello everyone, my name is Sana Abdulmajid. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist. Let's move forward with our presentation. Dr. Stephen Shore, who's a very renowned autistic professor, says, "If you have met one person with autism, you have met one person with autism." And that is absolutely true. Autism is a very wide spectrum, and the way it affects one person won't be the same for everyone. For instance, it is true that a number of people on the spectrum can also have a learning disability. However, this is also true that more than half of autistic population does not have a learning disability. In fact, people who have Asperger's syndrome, which is a type of autism, have average or above average intelligence and very few speech and language difficulties. Consider these two examples here and see that Alice and Frank, in spite of being on the same spectrum, are completely different to each other and have their own difficulties, just like the rest of us. Therefore, it is vital to get away from the myths and stereotypes and remember that while there will be autistic people who can choose different careers and excel in them, some of them will probably require a lifelong support system to function. The S in this acronym is being used to describe sensory sensitivities that people on the spectrum might have. We all have 8 senses, namely vision, taste, smell, hearing, touch, body awareness, which is also known as proprioception, balance, which is also known as vestibular, and interoception, which tells you about your inside body sensations. Now, all these senses work together in harmony and provide us with information that is required to perform each and everything that we do. However, in autism, that's not the case. People who are on the spectrum can be over or undersensitive in any one or all of these senses. This is known as sensory integrative dysfunction or overload. Sensory difficulties can cause a lot of stress and anxiety, and at times even physical pain. Sensory difficulties also affect an individual's attention span and behavior. Consider this example here. The woman in question is hypersensitive to sense of smell, which is causing her distress and pain, so much so that she is not able to focus. Now, sensory sensitivities are tricky and can manifest themselves in a number of ways. Let's talk about some common ones which are prevalent in autistic individuals. Covering your ears in response to loud noises or not being able to filter the background noise, hypersensitivity to fluorescent lights, being aversive to light touch, such as someone stroking your hair or head or someone brush passing you. Certain clothing materials and tags can also distress autistic individuals. A number of autistic people are also seen to require deep pressure, such as hugs and weighted items. When it comes to body awareness, you may see autistic individuals flapping their hands, rocking, running, jumping, bumping into people, or standing too close to others. A limited food repertoire is also very commonly seen. While most of these sensitivities may require specific professional interventions, some basic modifications which can prove to be helpful to all the people on the spectrum include reducing input, providing regular sensory or motor breaks, respecting their choices, giving them time to process information. As we mentioned previously, that autistic people react differently to stress, and a number of times this can lead to a meltdown. Now, what is a meltdown? It is a state in which an autistic person becomes extremely anxious and loses self-control, so much so that he or she can no longer function. As every person on the spectrum is an individual, therefore their reactions during a meltdown may vary. Let's consider an example here. John and his mom are going to the local grocery shop to buy apples. When they get to the shop, there are no apples left, so they cannot buy any. John runs off because they went to the shop to buy apples and he cannot understand why this isn't possible. Meltdowns are usually caused by many small moments which build up until the person cannot cope. Sometimes these can be avoided. However, there are occasions when these are just unavoidable. Moving on to a quick recap of what we have covered by now. In autism, every little thing can feel too much. Unexpected changes can cause stress and anxiety. People on the spectrum require more processing time. It is recommended that at least a 30-second information processing window is provided to people on the spectrum. Every person on the spectrum is an individual and should be treated like one. Autistic people can present with sensory differences, which should be respected. Extreme stress can result into a meltdown. The National Autistic Society, which is a UK-based organization, conducted a research and found that 99% of people in UK have heard of autism, but 87% of autistic population feels that people don't really understand what autism is. Why is that? One of the main reasons for this could be the misconceptions and misjudgments that autistic people have to face at the hands of general public. Now, it is well known that autism affects a person's ability to socialize and interact. In spite of that, when autistic individuals and their families make an effort and do go out, they are subjected to scrutiny, stares, and glares, which in turn makes them uncomfortable and impacts their self-esteem. That is why more and more people are choosing to stay home and avoid these interactions. This means an autistic individual's person, an autistic person's world just keeps shrinking and shrinking. Now, the quote that we have here is from a family that has an autistic member, and they happened to attend an autism-friendly performance where sensory adjustments were made and the staff had some awareness of autism. This just goes to show that a few small changes and understanding can help autistic people and their families in feeling welcomed and supported. Now take a moment and think about your workspace. Think about its environment. How autism friendly is it? The lights, the colors, sounds, smells, textures that might be there, which people on the spectrum may find unhelpful. How can we modify those to help them? Think about the information people receive. Do you have clearly marked signs and arrows to help autistic visitors and colleagues? Think about your customer care service. What kind of interaction, advice, and help is available for autistic people and their families? And lastly, think about other people who visit. How can you help them understand autism better? Well, this brings us to our top tips. Number one is take time. If you could only take away one thing from today's presentation, that should be it. Give people on the spectrum time to process information, time to recover from an overload. At times, they might need more than 30 seconds. In certain cases, you may never get an answer, and that's okay too. Make space. Reduce the sensory input. Turn off loud music and the bright lights down. Try to create a safe space as best as you can. Try not to stare and encourage others also to do the same. Imagine. Put yourself in an autistic person's shoes. Imagine feeling so overwhelmed that you couldn't cope. How would you feel if someone showed a little kindness and the difference it would make? No one likes to be judged as a naughty kid or a weirdo flapping their hands. Remember, a little understanding can go a long, long way and help us create an inclusive society. Now, we at Renath believe in not just educating students, but also reaching out to the community. This video is an example of that. We are looking to provide autism-friendly awards to businesses and companies who would like further trainings. So if you are interested in becoming an autism-friendly business site, feel free to contact us. We offer a variety of trainings comprising of different durations and catering to your needs. We also provide trainings to professionals, educators and specialists who work with people on the spectrum. We are always looking for partners as well. We have many activities that our students access due to partnerships. For instance, Al-Shakab Academy. Our students go there weekly for horse riding lessons. Lastly, we are going to list educational resources on our website, which is listed here. Thank you so much for watching our video. Hopefully, it helped you gain an insight into supporting people with autism.